So Warblers on Bootcamp, I think this is the third year that we've done this program. It's definitely good for us to do this every year to get a refresher on the warbler songs before they come through. So it's always a good exercise. A little bit of information about Clifton, in case you haven't been to one of our programs before. We are a 501c3 nonprofit located near Warrenton, Virginia. We have 6 full-time staff, and we're funded by individual donations and foundation grants. And our 3 program areas are education, restoration, and research. Having a little trouble here. There we go. Our mission is to inspire a deeper understanding and appreciation of nature, to study the ecology of our region, to restore habitat, and to conserve native biodiversity. We have a 900-acre property located about 5 miles north of Warrenton, and it's protected permanently under a conservation easement. We have a huge variety of habitats. It's about half forest and half fields of different kinds, including some really nice native grasslands. And we have an iNaturalist project that we're using to document all of the species on the property. And the latest exciting find was a winter bumblefly that we found back in February, and that's one of the rarest flies in North America. So there's a lot of cool stuff hiding out. This shows our location in central Fauquier County in Northern Virginia. So why warblers? Warblers are, my dad said once, they're like tropical reef fish that migrate through our area twice every year. It's really a treat to have these tropical birds come through. And there's a huge variety of them. They come in a lot of different colors, shapes, and sizes, and they occupy different habitats. They're a really great group of birds, but it's a bit of a challenge to identify them by year every year. So that's why we're doing this workshop. So before I get to the birds, just a little bit more about warblers. So here's an example species, the northern parula. This is a relatively short distance migrant. So you see the orange areas are the breeding range, the yellow shows migration, and the blue shows non-breeding. It also migrates through the breeding areas shown on the map. And you can see that it winters in the Caribbean, South Florida, northern Mexico, and then it flies up here to spend the summer. So this is a short distance migrant, and this is one of the earlier species to show up in our area. Eleanor, are you watching the chat just to make sure?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. And for an example, yep.
If anyone does have any issues or anything, I am in the chat. So if you have any problems, just let me know.
Awesome, thanks. As an example of a long distance migrant, we have the Blackpool Warbler. And this species winters in northern South America, and it breeds in the boreal forest in Canada and Alaska, as well as a few spots in New England. And you can see that it does this incredible trip in the spring. It flies across the Caribbean and into our area and migrates through. And this is one of our last migrating warblers to show up, but it's a really common one. So in May, we have plenty of blackpolls, but they won't be here still for a while. And you can see why. They have a long way to go. Then they have this remarkable migration where in the fall, they do a direct flight from New England and the other parts of the northeastern US straight across to Trinidad. So it's a pretty small bird to make such an incredible direct flight across the ocean. Another reason why warblers are cool. And I wanted to put this up. This is these are bar charts from eBird. And this gives you an idea of the seasonal occurrence of species in our area. So this is for the 5 or so Northern Virginia counties. And you can see that as you go along, so it's January through December, and the thicker the green bar is, the more common the bird is. So you can see in this group of birds, the earlier species are like the common yellowthroat and parula. We already mentioned parula. Yellow warbler is another fairly early one. And we've already had yellowthroats here at Clifton. We haven't had any of these other species, but you can see they're about to come through. And this is a helpful tool because it can, if you're in March, you're pretty sure it's none of these guys. And if you're in early April, it probably isn't either, maybe a yellowthroat. But this is one way to start narrowing down the warbler songs that you're hearing out there. And it's really interesting to see when they peak. So like common yellowthroats are a breeder here, but you can see that there's obviously a passage of migrants that still come through in late April and early May, for example. So you can check those out at ebird.org. And our area is special because we have a really great range of habitats. So we're located in the Piedmont, but not far from us are the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Ridge and Valley. And then also not far in the opposite direction is the coastal plain. So we have a really cool range of breeding habitats here and a good set of warblers associated with those habitats. So in the top left is the Cerulean Warbler up at Thompson Wildlife Management Area. This is the highest point of Fauquier County, and it's in the Blue Ridge province. You can see the trilliums in the understory. A lot of people go there to see the trilliums. So there's a higher elevation group of breeding warblers there. Then in the top right, this shows the forest at Clifton. So this is a tulip poplar dominated Mesic hardwood forest. And in the understory, where we have a thick understory, we have Kentucky warblers that breed. Then in the bottom left, this is a shrubland at the Clifton Institute, where we have prairie warblers sometimes, and we always have field sparrows. So you can see just the habitat difference at Clifton, just as an example. You would never have a Kentucky warbler out in the middle of a shrubland, nor would you have a prairie warbler inside the forest. So another way to start narrowing it down. And then in the bottom right, this is a bottomland forest at Huntley Meadows, where there are species like prothonotary warblers that you would not see in these other habitats. So I think 2 points. One is that you can use habitat to narrow it down when you're kind of overwhelmed by all these warblers. And the second point is there are a lot of cool habitats in our area and probably wherever else you're calling in from. And it's worth moving around a bit to see what kinds of warblers are breeding there. So I'll go through songs of migrating warblers, species that migrate through our area, and also breeders. And these are grouped in order of similarity of song. And this follows the handy dandy cheat sheet that Eleanor prepared. And hopefully that'll make it a little less bewildering if we're able to put these warblers into rough groups. And difficult and easy species are mixed in. And I have put yellow stars by species that, like the 5 or so easiest species, ones that you should try to start with first. Okay, so that's not a warbler. But this is a good example. A winter wren is a good example of how to look at a sonogram. It's hard because I've got, here we go. All right. So depending on your internet connection, it may be delayed a bit, but I hope that you can see that we have frequency on the y-axis here. So the higher you are up in the figure, the higher pitch the sound, and along the x-axis is time. So we're going to play this song, and as it progresses, you'll see it hit these different notes. And the winter wren has one of the most amazing songs of our songbirds. So are you able to hear that, Eleanor? Just double checking.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So it has this incredible song, really fast, lots of different notes. One way to try to interpret this is also you can slow the playback down. That might be a little too slow. We'll see here. So you get the idea. It sounds really fast to our ear, and it's really hard, at least for my brain, to interpret exactly what's happening. But if you slow it down, that helps a lot. This is free software, Audacity. You can download that and look at sonograms of recordings that you make or recordings that you download. And that can be really helpful when you're trying to identify these birds. You can make recordings on your phone out in the field and then look at sonograms to try to help you figure it out. All right, so now to the warblers. So first we're going to look at the buzzy group, starting with Northern Parula. We've already talked about Northern Parula. So this is a really fast, very buzzy trill. And that's a variation. I guess, Eleanor, it may make that, does it sing that variation to males, or what was it?
I don't know exactly with parallels, but there are a lot of warblers that have two song types. One that's intended for warding off other males from their territories, and one that's intended for attracting females. And in general, the male kind of repulsion one is a little bit, I think, stronger and more aggressive. So I don't know with parallel offhand, but it is fun. That's one reason that warblers and other birds are tricky, is that they have multiple song types that you have to kind of key into, that it can also help you figure out what they're saying, which is fun.
So the parallel, I'll play you a little bit more. So a fast rising trill, that's a typical song, very buzzy. This is a really common bird, especially in sort of bottomland areas, and we have them breeding here. In comparison, I'll play the Blackburnian.
Oh, sorry, one sec.
Somebody picked up the phone, it's fine. So here's the Blackburnian. So keep the parallel in your mind here, and this is a thinner, very high-pitched version. So it's slower than the parallel, and at the end is very high. It's actually more similar to Cerulean, but again, it's very high and thin compared to Cerulean, and I'll play that one next. Yeah, and that last note is so high that probably a lot of people are not going to be able to hear it at all, unfortunately. So all of our hearing declines as we age, and the high pitched ones are the first to go. So, but even if you hear the rest of it, it sounds similar to a Cerulean, but a bit higher. So I'll play Cerulean next. But before I do that, I'll say Blackburnian is mainly a migrant in our area, but they do breed at higher elevations uncommonly around here.
Can I say one thing about Blackburnian? Sorry to interrupt.
Yep, please.
Another kind of tip that we'll definitely get into with some of the other easier warblers, but another tip for kind of learning birdsong is to try to put words to what you're hearing. And so there are kind of standardized ones that lots of bird watchers have kind of agreed on. Bert does not agree with mine for Blackburnian, but I kind of think it's saying its own name, which is Blackburnian.
That's pretty good.
I don't know if that works for anyone else, but I'm happy to share that one with you, or it's just it's a nice tool to kind of try to think about what the words are that you might assign to any song.
Oh wait, jumping the gun. Bonus points if anyone knows what that one is. You can put it in the chat. All right, now we'll play Cerulean. It's the same color as the last one. So it's deeper than Blackburnian. Almost bury, but another buzzy trill. Okay, and on to, so before I say that, Cerulean is a breeder in our area. This is one of our fastest declining warblers in North America, unfortunately. Not doing well at all, probably because of deforestation in the Andes, the Andean foothills, but there could be some problems with habitat management here as well. It likes mature forests, and you can see them at Thompson Wildlife Management Area. Next is Black-throated Blue. That was the one I had the sneak peek of there. Rising and buzzy. So another rising buzzy trill. When you look at the sonogram, you can tell it's buzzy. because there are lots of these little wavy lines. They're stacked on top of each other, all these wavy lines, as opposed to a pure tone whistle that would be much better defined. Next, we have its cousin, the black-throated green. So this one says Z, 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 Z. Yeah, so I probably should have put a yellow star by this one. This is one that is pretty distinctive. There's nothing else really like it. And if you remember Z, 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 Z. Black-throated green.
Sorry to keep jumping in. One more
No, go
thing.
for it.
So Bert's talking about how to kind of interpret. So can you pull up the black-throated green spectrogram again? It's another good skill to kind of develop how to interpret spectrograms as different qualities of sound and vice versa. If you're hearing a quality of sound, to kind of think about what that would look like on a spectrogram. And so what Bert's talking about is reading the buzziness. This is a really nice example where you can see the first two notes are really buzzy from how much vertical space they take up. And then the third and fourth notes are much more of a pure whistle, and so the dark band is quite narrow vertically. And so even within this one sound, there's a really pretty good contrast between a buzzy sound and more of a pure whistle.
Cool, absolutely, for sure. All right. Next, we move on to the trill group. So we're moving past the buzzy ones. And for this one, the first of the trills, I've put these three together: pine warbler, chipping sparrow, and worm eating. They are really similar, especially chipping sparrow and worm eating. We've had a chipping sparrow here at Clifton for the last couple of days singing. And if I heard that song in the middle of a forest on a steep slope, I would say, wow, that's probably a worm eating. So the context is really helpful when you're trying to identify these guys. So I'll play all three. We'll start with pine warbler. So it's almost liquid, fast trill. Now that is chipping sparrow. Chipping sparrow is much more metallic than pine. That's a variation of the chipping sparrow. And that's worm eating. So I'll play them all again. Worm eating is a bit slower and not as loud as chipping, pretty much. At least that's how I try to tell them apart. And the habitat is helpful. So chipping sparrows are found in urban areas, and also open fields and forest edge. Worm eating is found inside a mature forest. So that's pine. Pine, and then we'll have two variations of chipping. And that's worm eating. So basically slower and a little quieter than the chipping sparrow. Pine warbler is a common breeder around here, and they're one of our earliest ones to show up. A couple of them overwinter, and in February they show up and they're eating our suet and stuff and setting up their territories. They like to have a couple of pine trees, but they're pretty flexible in terms of their habitat. Next, we go to orange-crowned. So orange-crowned is an uncommon or rare migrant in our area. They don't breed here. A few of them winter in Southeast Virginia, but it's pretty unusual to hear them singing, or maybe I just can't identify them by ear. So it's a descending trill. I would also say it's metallic, kind of like a chipping sparrow, but descending. So if you hear one of those, you're lucky. But just keep your ear out if you hear a funny sounding chipping sparrow. It could be an orange crown. You might be in luck. Palm is next. So palm warbler is another early migrant. So we've had them here for a week or two now. They're passing through. They are a short distance migrant. They winter in Florida and the Bahamas. And they're headed up to the boreal forest. We have more yellow palms and brown palms here. They breed further east in the boreal forest, but we do have both groups that come through. And it's really unusual to hear them singing. I don't know why, but when they're migrating through here, they usually don't sing in my experience, but they have a distinctive chip note that they make. So we'll play it for you. It's a very buzzy trill, raspy sort of trill. Yeah, I promise we won't spend much time on chip notes in this program, but that's pretty distinctive, a very dry metallic chip that the palm warblers make. And they tend to be in open areas. They can also be in forests, but if you have a warbler, if you hear something, a chip note like that in an open area and you see a bird bobbing its tail, then you got a palm warbler. Okay, this one is unique. There's nothing else quite like it. And luckily it's distinctive. This is the Tennessee Warbler. This species is an uncommon migrant in our area. They come through pretty late, so in early to mid-May, they're coming through, and they have a really distinctive song, and they don't breed here. They're much further north. They're not a whole lot to look at, but they have a really cool song. So it's a three-part song. There are no other warblers in our area that have three distinctive parts to the song like that. So the first part is quite jumbled. Second part, third part. So that's the Tennessee Warbler. Okay, now ones that sound like ping pong balls. This is not a warbler, but this is a common songbird around here. They're actually declining pretty fast, unfortunately, due to the loss of shrubland habitat. But we still have quite a few around here, and they're really vocal. They start singing early in the spring, and it sounds like a dropping ping pong ball. So it accelerates and descends. Or sometimes it goes up. Usually it goes down. So that's a field sparrow dropping ping pong ball. And the habitat is important for this one too. So it's going to be out in the open. This is not a forest bird. And then there is a warbler also found out there that is somewhat similar in song, the Prairie Warbler. So if you look at that sonogram, you can tell this is going to be a buzzy one. So it's a rising, fuzzy song. It's a really beautiful song, and we don't have very many of them at Clifton, unfortunately. We're working on that, trying to encourage some more cedar trees, which they seem to really like. But Leopold's Preserve in Prince William County has got a lot of breeding prairie warblers, which is really great because this bird is also declining. It's actually in worse shape even than the field sparrow. High, thin buzzes. Well, that was a high, thin buzz, but not as high and thin as these two. The blue-winged warbler and the golden wing. These are two of our most beautiful warblers. And they're also found in early successional habitat, so shrublands and fields. Easy. So that's a distinctive, very buzzy, thin two-part. It rarely has that third part or fourth. Yeah, so it almost always is just two. I'll play that one more time. Yeah, and it's almost insect-like. So you'll often be out there, and this is sort of this one is in like early May is when they come through. They're uncommon, but we always get a few of them in the spring around here, migrating through, and it's kind of insect-like, and you really have to be listening closely to hear the song. Of course, it's this beautiful egg yolk yellow, so sometimes you see them before you hear them. And next we have golden wing warbler. This one is in even worse shape than the cerulean, so this is one of our worst off warblers in North America. Presumably because of habitat loss, they require shrublands. They're also being hybridized out of existence by blue wings. And you can see them. We still have a few that breed in Highland County in Virginia, and also in Western Maryland up at high elevations, and also in West Virginia. So very high and thin and buzzy. Yeah, so compared to blue winged, it's higher pitch and it's also more than two parts. And sometimes you actually see the hybrids migrating through. So there are no records of golden wing warbler at the Clifton Institute, but a hybrid was seen a couple of years ago. But it's definitely worth the trip to Highland County. Okay, next we have the Carolina Wren group. So hopefully you know the song of the Carolina Wren. It's one of our most vocal birds around here. And these warblers are roughly similar to a Carolina Wren. Common yellowthroat, this is one of our most distinctive and common warblers that's out in open fields, especially shrubbier fields. Witchity, 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 witch. That's if they're in another mood. That's unusual. So it's a rollicking, pure-toned song. Witchity, 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 witch. This is a good one to learn. It's a really common bird in our area. Okay, now we do ovenbird, Kentucky, and Carolina wren. These are all fairly similar, so they're all in one track. They're found in different places though. So ovenbird is found in open forests, so forests with not much understory, usually mature forests, and it's walking around on the ground making a very powerful song. Kentucky's, like I talked about before, are in mature forests that have a thick understory, and then Carolina wrens are everywhere, especially around houses. So that's an ovenbird. It's a little hard to hear in this recording, but it gets louder as it goes along. So that's probably not true of any of the other warblers. So it really is explosive at the end. It starts fairly quiet and gets really loud at the end. And it says paired notes. You can see in the sonogram it gets darker at the end. So that's ovenbird, and now we'll do Kentucky. So it's also paired notes, but it's a different tone, and it does not get louder at the end. Also, as I said, the habitat is fairly different. That's also Kentucky. That's with three notes. Now that's a Carolina wren. So I hope you're hearing some of those differences, and the habitat really helps.
This is another one with a mnemonic for ovenbird, and in Kentucky a little bit, but really ovenbird. It's teacher, 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 teacher.
Yeah, well, that's tricky because Carolina wren, some people say that for Carolina wren.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if it says tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, that's Carolina wren. Next, we have Wilson's Warbler. This is another beauty. This one is an uncommon or rare migrant through our area, and it has a very undistinctive song. So hopefully you'll see it because the song for me is tricky. I mean, if you're out west, it's the same with orange-crowned. If you're out on the breeding range of these birds and they're common, then you can learn their songs. But here, they're rare to begin with, and they don't seem to sing very much. And so it's really hard to get practice with these Western species here. They'd have, and they have a small population breeding in the boreal forest in the east, but they're mainly Western species. So it's basically a fast trill. I guess the Warbler book puts this in the group as Carolina wren, so it doesn't sound much like a Carolina wren to me. Yeah, so if you hear a fast, undistinctive trill, look at it and see what it is. Try to find it. That's the best way to learn these bird songs, is if you hear something unusual, track it down. That's the best way to learn. On to Mourning Warbler. This is another cool one. This species breeds at higher elevations in West Virginia and a little bit in Highland County. That's about as close as it gets to us. Also in Western Maryland and high elevations, forests with a dense understory. And they migrate through rarely. We don't get them very often. So you can see, I mean, this one is more similar to like the pattern of a yellowthroat or a Carolina wren in some ways, but it's a churry, burry sort of song. Now to the operatic melody. So Eleanor, which opera is the Louisiana water thrush singing from?
It's singing La Donna Mobile from Rigoletto.
Thank you. Awesome.
You all know that song.
I could not have sung that or recalled that. Thank you. So this one is our earliest long distance migrant to show up here. So they winter down in Costa Rica and also in Mexico, but they show up in March and they seem to do okay with some cold spring weather. And they're along creeks. So if you hear a song like this along a creek, especially down on the ground or right along the creek, it's probably one of these. Yeah, so you can hear it's the sort of cascading song, and it ends with a little bit of a jumble. So you hear a hint of that with this one. And depending on their mood, they can really go into a jumble at the end. And here's some chip notes. So before this, I was walking along the Springhouse Trail at Clifton, and I heard these chip notes. They make them a lot along the creek, and it's a really strong metallic chip. Next, we have the Yellow-throated Warbler. This is another cascading sort of song. Not very common in our area. We had one pair breeding at Riverside Preserve last year. They are found in riparian areas, but they're up in the treetops, so they're not down on the ground where the water thrushes are. So definitely descending. And a bit louder at the end. Yeah, so similar to Louisiana water thrush, and it helps, the habitat and the context really help. And next we have Swainson's warbler. So we realized last year that we left out Swainson's and orange crown. So we're including these two for the sake of completeness. You're not likely to have one of these migrating through here. That would be really awesome. But they do breed down in the Dismal Swamp. So if you would like to see one, that's a place to go for them. And they have a really cool song, Sue Sue Sisterville. Yeah, and you can hear them sometimes in the same places as where you'd hear a Louisiana water thrush. Yeah, it just takes practice, and it's really a rare bird around here. Okay, now on to the explosive melody songs. So northern water thrush, um, compared to a Louisiana, you can see it's a bit yellower, and the eye stripe tapers at the end instead of, it doesn't flare at the end on the right there. Northern water thrushes migrate through here. They don't breed here, although I think they do in Delhi Sods, not too far away in the mountains of West Virginia. And they tend to be found around lakes, whereas Louisiana water thrushes are found along creeks and rivers. So it's fast, powerful, kind of jumbled. I heard one of these one time and I thought it was a Connecticut, and I was really excited. And these are common migrants through here, so we'll have them passing through before long, but they will not stay and breed. Another jumbled song is the Canada Warbler. This is another of the outstanding beauties. It's really an amazing bird. So compared to the northern water thrush, it's sweeter, a little higher pitched, even more jumbled and not as powerful. Very jumbled. And this in our area is a high elevation species, so it breeds at the highest elevations of Shenandoah National Park. And the same is true down further south into the Appalachian Mountains. And they also migrate through in fair numbers. They're never common. It's always good to see one, but we see them every year migrating through here. And now onto Connecticut. So this is one of the rarest warblers. Only a few pass through each year. So Andrew, our habitat specialist, was lucky to see one of these at Riverside Preserve last fall. I still have never seen one in Virginia. It's always a tough one. They're very skulky, and they sing a little bit, but it's really hard to see. We want to go to Minnesota just to see them on the breeding grounds. Yeah, my dad says it sounds like they're trying to say Connecticut. I don't know what you think about that, Eleanor, being from Connecticut. Definitely jumbled. It's pretty similar to a northern water thrush, but not as powerful.
There's a question, is it Connecticut? Is it Connecticut that needs a very specific species of pine tree? And well, go ahead.
That sounds like Kirtlands. So Kirtlands require jack pines as breeding habitat, and they're localized. They're only breed in Michigan and a few nearby states and provinces. And the branches of the jack pines touch the ground and they nest right under those branches. Onto the full-throated sweet songs. So Chestnut Sided is another one that's pretty easy, I think, pretty distinctive song. The problem is that there's some other species that sound similar to it. And it's pretty common in early successional habitat at high elevation, so it breeds in Shenandoah National Park. And they say, pleased to meet you. It's a pretty nice greeting, you know? Okay, but that didn't sound very good. So, okay, if they say pleased to meet you, there's nothing else like it. That's very distinctive. But there, it just did not enunciate at all. It didn't say pleased to meet you. It just said warble, warble, warble. And that's the problem. So Magnolia and Yellow Warbler can both say very similar things. So I'll play that one more time. And it really helps to have context. So where you are, the habitat, if they breed in where you are or not. In migration, of course, it's harder because they're all passing through at the same time.
And this is one, like I said before, that a lot of warblers have been documented to have two different song types, and Chestnut Sideds are kind of famous for that. So it's not just that they're lazy or trying to aggravate you. There is a biological reason for those differences. So it's kind of interesting to think about why they might be making different song types.
So next is Magnolia. So I've already said it's similar to the Chestnut Sided. If Chestnut Sided is not saying pleased to meet you. Yeah, you could, I guess if you try to make it say pleased to meet you, you could, but it's more jumbled, more rollicking up and down. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I mean those last two songs, it could be either Magnolia, Chestnut Sided, or Yellow. So don't get discouraged. I mean, keep track of the habitat where you are. So Magnolia it only breeds up in the boreal forest and at really high elevations in the mountains. So unlikely to occur around here. So that helps. And then in migration, magnolias are really common, so you're going to get looks at them, which is great. Now on to Yellow Warbler. That should be an easy one as long as it's enunciating. Sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet. Yeah, so there, unfortunately, it just said something like pleased to meet you. So it's tricky. But now luckily, Yellow Warbler in the breeding season, so they're going to be in around wetlands, around willows, and they're not going to be at high elevations in Shenandoah. So it's completely different habitat in our area during the breeding season. So I'll play, but if it says sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet, you got a yellow. Next we go to prothonotary. So like I said before, this is a bottomland species. And so it just, instead of sweet, sweet, sweeter than sweet, it just says sweet, 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 sweet. Yeah, and it helps to see the sonogram because you can hear that it goes down and up, I think. I mean, it's fast, but if you know that that's what it's doing, it helps. I think you can hear that it's upslurred in that way. And on to Nashville. So we're in the full-throated sweet song group. Yeah, so I think Nashville, I mean, that's a tricky one. For me, Nashville sounds a lot like Red Start, which we're going to play next. So Nashville, I mean, at first it doesn't sound very distinctive, and it sounds like it's going to be a problem. But the thing about Nashville is that it always goes down at the end. It has those 5 or so notes at the end that go down distinctively. There's nothing else quite like that. Yep, so that's Nashville. This is an uncommon migrant. We get a couple of them each year coming through. They don't breed around here. Difficult and variable and thin. This is redstart. So this is a super common breeder in Shenandoah National Park. It's also found along some rivers, but a lot less commonly in our area. And unfortunately, it's quite a variable song. For being a common warbler, it doesn't help us out much because the song is pretty variable. But you can see why you might get it confused with Nashville, because if you are lucky and they're doing one of their distinctive phrases, there's an obvious down note at the end. So if you hear a warbler with sort of pure tone song like this that goes down at the end during migration, it's very likely a redstart because Nashvilles are not very common. But after you hear a couple of redstarts and then you hear something that sounds different, it might jump out as a Nashville. Yeah, this is the really classic redstart song right here. At that one, it goes down at the end, and the last note is also slightly buzzy. Yeah, that's classic redstart. And now on to a difficult group, the high and thin group, especially if you're starting to lose your hearing in the upper end. This is a problematic group, but luckily they're pretty to look at least. I better close all these actually. Weesey, 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 weesey. So that's pretty distinctive, the black and white. It's like a squeaky wheel. Weesey, 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 weesey. Yeah, and that's a breeder in our area at higher elevations. And now onto the really high pitched ones that are migrants. So Cape May, another beauty. There's not much to this song. So very high, pure toned. And this is a really common migrant to our area, but it's undercounted because the song is so hard to hear. So keep your ears out and you're probably playing with these guys. Then we have bay-breasted, which is a lot less common than Cape May. And for me, the songs are extremely similar. I really have trouble telling them apart. So I'll play the classic bay-breasted song that you almost never hear. Usually the bay-breasted songs that I hear are basically identical to what I just played for Cape May. So this is rollicking, do 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 do, but it's very rare that you hear that. And that's more of a typical bay-breasted song there, and you could hear there's not much to listen to. It still has a suggestion, a hint of the rollicking nature of it, but very high and thin, and not very distinctive. That's a bay-breasted. So Cape May and bay-breasted both breed up in the boreal forest. Blackpool does as well. We talked about its amazing migration, and it is really common here. It's like the beginning of the end of migration. When you have lots of black poles, you know migration is almost over. Very high and thin like the others, but much faster. Yep, that is black pole. So we are getting towards the end here, and we left a couple of common ones for the end. Difficult and variable that warbles. This is the Yellow Rum Purbler. So this species actually winters in our area in small numbers, and it also comes through early in the season. We already have a lot of these migrating through, and they're singing like crazy. Unfortunately, it's a very common bird, but unfortunately the song is not very distinctive. So it goes down at the end, so it could be confused with Nashville. But it doesn't always have that note down at the end. Yeah, that's more typical. So it just is this sort of warble that is not distinctive. It kind of has a ringing quality to it. Yeah, and they are mostly a migrant through here. There are a couple that breed at higher elevations on the West Virginia line. Unique hooded warbler doesn't sound like anything else really. It says weeda weeda weedio. And that's a variation that it does sometimes. Another chip note, I know. Yeah, but these can be really distinctive. So hooded warblers breed in the understory in Shenandoah National Park and also in Thompson Wildlife Management Area. And they especially like mountain laurel thickets. Um, and often in the middle of the summer, you'll just hear these metallic chips coming from the understory shrubs. Weeda, weeda, weedio. That's a good one to learn. And also a really beautiful one. And finally, we have the chat, which may or may not be a warbler even. It's been a debate for a long time. I have not checked the latest genetic analysis, but you can see it looks funny it doesn't really look like a warbler and also doesn't sound like one at all. It sounds more like a thrasher or a mockingbird, like a mimid. Really cool song. And this is a bird of shrublands, of taller shrubs. We have quite a few that breed at Clifton. A really cool, varied song. Chats are Okay, so that's it for the songs. Just to wrap up, so a few ideas for resources, how to work on your warbler song identification. So we do bird walks at the Clifton Institute twice a month, and the Northern Virginia Bird Club also does regular walks all over Northern Virginia. These are all free and led by usually expert guides. And definitely the best way to learn these bird songs is by going out with somebody who knows the songs. You can work really hard on your phone and making recordings and looking at recordings, but the best way is to be out with somebody who knows. The Sibley app, it costs 20 bucks, but it's got all of the birds of North America. So it's got their songs as well as a description and a range map and really nice drawings, paintings. Stokes bird songs, that's what I use in this presentation. That's the recordings of all the species in North America. Merlin has really improved, and so you can use Merlin. It's a free app to get a first guess at what you're hearing, so it can actually make a recording, listen to the bird, and give you a guess at what it is, and it's getting better. Voice Recorder Pro is an app that I use to record bird songs in WAV format, so that's uncompressed audio files, which is really important for making high quality recordings. It's free, and that you can use that to make a recording, and then you can email me and say, hey, I heard this bird, what is it? That's the best way by far. It's really hard to describe a bird song to somebody. Always much better to make a recording. iNaturalist and Xenocanto are also helpful. So iNaturalist, that's what I've got a screenshot here of, is one of my records on iNaturalist. I made some recordings of a Chestnut Sided Warbler chip note and put it up there. There's some real expert people in iNaturalist that can help you identify recordings and photos as well. And the program I was using for the sonograms is Audacity. That's another free program. So take-home messages. It's really important in bird watching in general, and especially with birding by ear, to narrow down the options by habitat type, elevation, time of year, where it is in the forest, on the ground, in the shrubs, or in the treetops. As you can see, we've got more than 30 species of warblers during migration, and it's a challenge to identify them. So you really want to narrow down your possibilities. And making recordings is a good idea. So like I said, you can play it to somebody else. You can make a permanent record. You can put it on iNaturalist. You can come back a year later, play the recording. That's a really good way to learn. And I would also say, don't get discouraged. So I've got a photo of a royal flycatcher from the tropics here. It turns out that tropical birds in the New World, at least, are mostly in a different group of passerines that have much more simple vocal cords, and their songs are much simpler and stereotypical and much easier to learn than these warblers that we're having to learn. So take heart that these are some of the harder bird songs in the world to learn. Thank you very much. I guess maybe Eleanor can send me questions.
Yeah, so I've got two already from the chat that I kind of flew by before I could stop Bert. So I will try to get to the two that I saw in the chat. But if you have more, I think probably the easiest is to put them in the chat and then I'll say them out loud to Bert. So April just asked, I think, about the bird walks. Are they on Facebook or the website? So our bird walks are always on our website, cliftoninstitute.org/events. And we do it usually the second Wednesday and fourth Saturday. It changes sometimes because of other events going on, and then the start times also change, later in the winter, earlier in the summer. So we have still a couple spots tomorrow at bright and early at 7 a.m. But the Nova Bird Club, how can you find them, Bert?
Yeah, if you Google Northern Virginia Bird Club, you'll find it.
And I think you kind of have to become a member, but then once you're kind of
you don't have to be a member to go on the walks.
Okay.
But I think it's $10 a year, so it's pretty affordable membership.
The other question that I saw go by was about the golden-winged, blue-winged hybrid song. So does it sound like one or the other, or a mix of both, or what?
Ooh, I don't know. Hey, Andrew, do you know that? Or if anyone else knows the answer to that, that's a really good question.
My uninformed guess would be that it would depend on the male that they learned it from, because most of these birds are learning when they're young. And so if it's learning from a male blue-winged, it's going to sound more like a blue-winged. And if it's learning from a male golden-winged, it's going to sound more like a golden-winged. But I imagine there is a bit of a genetic predisposition too. Yeah, I can unmute Andrew if there's anything.
We'll look into that. That's a good one.
Hey, it's Andrew.
Hey, yeah. Do you know the answer to that one?
You can actually, I believe you can tell, like, whether it's what kind of hybrid it is. Even like it's very specific. It's very much a mix of the two. But you can tell if it's like a back cross.
Right. The Lawrences or the Brewsters. I forget which is which.
Yeah. But it's very much an in-between song. I haven't heard it in so long that I wouldn't be able to describe it. But
that's cool. Yeah. I've never seen one of these hybrids, so I'm pretty useless on that.
Any other questions out there? That was a lot to throw at you. And I hope if you don't have it in front of you now, I hope you'll, the cheat sheet was intended to kind of give you our tips and tricks and all that kind of thing. So I hope that's helpful for you as well as you're birding on your own over the next few weeks.
Okay, we don't see any further questions, so thank you all very much, and we hope to see you out in the field.
Bye.